listening to the Subrogation Support Network, a podcast from Mathieson, Wickert & Layer, America's subrogation law firm, with dissemination of new developments and changes in subrogation law, as well as emerging trends and best practices. Here's your host, Ashton Kirsch.
Hello, audience. This is Ashton Kirsch coming to you with the Subrogation Support Network podcast, brought to you by Mathieson, Wickert & Layer. This is actually an exciting day because from what I'm being told, this is our 50th podcast recording. So big things going on. You know, I was sitting there thinking, how long have we been doing this? Talking to Peyton, the producer on the show. And she's like, yeah, we're on lucky number 50. So today I am bringing you just an amazing guest. We have Carl Van joining us for this 50th episode. Carl, how you doing today?
Great. Where's my confetti?
Confetti, the balloons being sent over. You know, we'll send you some cookies or some good Wisconsin cheese.
I'll take anything.
Something to go along with it. So Carl is an interesting guy. I've known Carl for years, well known in the conference circuit, the insurance space. He is one of the top trainers providing education to insurance people around the country, around the world now, on everything from negotiations to time management to customer service. Really what it is to be an awesome adjuster and claims person. Carl, before I jump into it and, start telling all the amazing things about you and your accolades, why don't you just tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing?
All right. Well, I've spent my entire career in claims adjuster, supervisor, branch manager, regional manager, blah, 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 up the ranks. Finally over claims, loss control, and premium audit. And that claims department did include Subro. So I was a Subro in Subro for probably about a year or so and then managed some Subro folks. About 7 years ago now, I started International Insurance Institute because as a claims executive, I was a little disappointed at the training my own people were getting. So I started doing my own little training classes in my own offices. And some of the other regional managers called me and said, hey, can we send our people over to you, Carl? And I actually liked it. So I like training. So I started the company about 27 years ago, assuming that the only customers we would get would be companies that did not have training departments. But within a year, the majors, State Farm, Allstate, Progressive, were all hiring us. So it's been a great 27 years and, we're still going strong. So that's kind of the background.
So you come in on behalf of usually the carrier and you provide training to their claims team. Is that right?
Right. I'm hired by the company to train their staff. Yes.
Are these daily, is this a full day of training? About how much training do you typically give to the team? Or is it depending on the carrier you work with?
Almost everything are one-day workshops. So negotiation, time management, customer service, whatever it is, it's a full day workshop. And whether or not it's in person or webinars, it's exactly the same. It's full day. There are some courses that are week-long. They're management courses. So we have a 6-part management course. But even those are one day every 3 months. But there's 6 parts. And we have found that after teaching people a full day of new skills, they're pretty much filled up. And they need time for that to sink in and practice and decide what works and see what doesn't. And, if you give them too much information, it just goes in and out. And so we try to stick to one-day workshops.
Yeah, I talk to people for an hour and you can tell they're falling asleep, but I am not nearly as dynamic as you are, Carl. Claims education is huge. So obviously you identified this early on. And I think it's even in today's day and age, though, we do see a major push at most carriers to get their people to attend conferences, to listen to the sessions. Our firm does a monthly webinar. We have thousands of people show up. So it's something people care about. And obviously, with the ease of access to information, it's becoming more and more integral in the day-to-day practice.
Right.
What is it about your courses that you think are special? Tell me a bit about the International Insurance Institute and those courses a little bit more in depth.
Sure. When I started the company, my absolute goal was to teach people things that they could use right away. Very practical things that they can put into place right away. Not too much theory, but practical. But things that they wouldn't pick up normally by themselves. So in the customer service, I would do research on who the very best claims customer service people were and what they did that was different than a lot of people. And a lot of it was stuff that you would not pick up just by being around for a long time. Same thing, especially negotiations. I spent 3.5 years monitoring and interviewing some fantastic claims negotiators and found out that they did things differently. And so when we do our negotiation classes, even people who've been doing claims for 15, 20, 25 years will say, I had no idea I was doing this wrong. Not wrong, but I had no idea I was giving this information away. I had no idea I was saying this the wrong way. And so what probably distinguishes our courses from almost any other training is they're getting the benefit of some research about how the very best people do it. And so it's not things that they would typically pick up just because they've been around a long time.
And you wrote some books about this, right? I mean, you are a critically acclaimed author. I got to give you a plug for those books. Tell us about the books that you have out there.
Well, negotiation for claims professionals. There's the 8 characteristics of the awesome adjuster. What makes really great claims people great. Book I co-wrote with John Copsia at Latitude, customer service for claims people. So those are definitely our top. My favorite is the claims cookbook, of course. So Emerald Lagasse helped me write some recipes for the claims industry. So we have negligent nachos and sosumi sushi and witness jambalaya.
I have a copy of that book somewhere.
Oh,
I
do?
loved
Okay.
it. That was so funny. I was at a conference. I remember, I think I was you or John or somebody gave me a copy. I'm like, oh, this is great. I love it.
So that's my favorite book. But even the small ones, the ones called Gaining Cooperation, how to get people to do what you want them to do without them feeling pushed around. Instead of saying, if you don't fill out this form, we can't get your deductible back. You'd say, if you do fill out the form, I can help make sure we get your deductible back. Just how to get people to do things you want them to do without them feeling pushed around or threatened. And that's called Gaining Cooperation. So that's one of our books. But all of the books have been from practical experience and definitely include a lot of information because of the monitoring that I've done, phone monitoring. So I use a lot of things I actually heard. So it's very practical.
When you say phone monitoring, Carl, are you talking about you're kind of listening in on dialogues while adjusters,
Yes.
people are actually negotiating?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I absolutely go to the company and set up a phone monitoring and I listen in remotely. Sometimes they know I'm listening. Sometimes they don't, but it really doesn't matter because even if someone knows I'm listening, they can't pretend they know something if they don't know it. So it doesn't much matter. So sometimes companies hire me specifically to listen in on the calls and then make recommendations for training. And sometimes they're looking for something very specific that I listen for. But because those are real life experiences, I can use them in the books, in the training courses, in our videos, our YouTube videos. It's all very real life. And I think that's what people like the most. They like it. Not only is it real life to what they do, but delivered by people who do what they do. So all of our instructors are all claims managers or above. Because we really do believe you have to understand this business if you really want to try to help people.
I don't know if I got this from you during a prior conversation, but I've done that a few times while building SOPs for carriers and helping to build out their subro teams. I call it ghosting or phantoming in on the calls where you're listening.
Sure.
And the stuff you learn is wild. I mean, you will have adjusters, 30 years, extremely, extremely talented, knowledgeable, where you're listening in and you realize that their approach to communications is just, it's not right. They should be handling it differently. And just by making some minor shifts to how they communicate, I mean, do you see the same? Is there just some really eye-opening things that you see?
Oh, absolutely. And the funny thing about it is the managers will say, well, I read the claim file. Okay, but a claims person will not document their file. Claimant would not agree to pay us back because I called him an idiot. He will not document their file that way. And so, so just reading claims files is about 10% of what's really going on in conversations. The other 90% is listening. So I always encourage the managers. I know you think you know what your people are saying, what they're doing, but you really got to listen if you want to find that out. And the ones that do always are just amazed. I had no idea this is what we're telling people.
And communications is key. I mean, that is what this job is. Be it, I know a lot of, as we discussed previously, your negotiations training is largely kind of based towards the liability adjusters. Is that correct?
It is.
Claims.
It is, but we do have a Subro version that Ben Ebling and I helped to we put together, and we've done for a couple of carriers. Subro training. It's all the same concepts, but you just have to reverse it. So instead of paying, you have to convince people to pay us back.
Now, I don't want you to give up your whole course for me today, but I think that you have these 3 amazing courses, at least ones that are kind of probably of interest to the audience. You're training on negotiations, time management tips, and customer service tips. Now, if you don't mind, I'd love to go through, maybe you can give us some food for thought on each of those. If we can start with maybe negotiations a little bit. Now, I'll
Sure.
say real quick, negotiations that's my passion, right? I think as most of my audience know, I probably give 100 negotiations trainings a year. And now these are not full day seminars. My audience would fall asleep if I spoke, but
Okay.
obviously you have a lot that you put forward on this. Walk me through. I mean, lawyers are awful at this, right? This is one thing where you think most lawyers should be fantastic negotiators. And then you look at it and you realize, oh, law school, you get maybe, if you're lucky, one course in your 3 years where you learn to negotiate, no sales training, nothing on communications, but you know everything you need to know about constitutional law. So that's the same, I feel like, for the insurance space, is people are communicating all day, but they're not really overly insightful or interactive with developing those skill sets. So what would your top tips be for those trying to become better at this?
An easy one to do in a conversation like this would be a section we call words to avoid. And when I told you when I interviewed and monitored these outstanding negotiators, I asked them, are there certain words or phrases you should not use? And what was so amazing was how consistent they were. It was so consistent on the certain words. And so I'll give you an example. I was monitoring a phone call, and this adjuster says to this person, hey, I had a chance to take a look at your file and came up with a value of about $30,000 and be willing to make you an offer of $30,000. And I can only pay $5,000 for your lost wages. So let's break this down. The first thing he said is, I took a look at your file. So think about this. I took a look at your file. What does that sound like? Does that sound like we put a lot of effort into it?
It does not.
I took a look at it. What does that sound like? You're trying to convince the person that you took this seriously, but you just used a phrase. And several people do this too. I took a look at your file. Now, to someone from outside, that doesn't sound like we worked very hard. And then he said, I had a chance to take a look at your file. Think about that. I had a chance. You had a chance amongst what? Does that mean you almost didn't? You mean my file is so unimportant you almost didn't get to it? So I don't think I'd say that to somebody. I think I'd say, you know what? The most important thing I've got to do right now is to make sure you're treated fairly and that we come to a conclusion here. So I want to let you know I thoroughly reviewed this case. I double checked the numbers and I want to go over it with you. But to say things like I had a chance, meaning I almost didn't do it, or took a look at it, makes it sound like we don't work very hard. And then how about this phrase? I came up with $30,000. Think about that. What does that sound like? We came up with $30,000.
Hey, somewhere in the air, it just
made it up.
Fell down. Yes.
Just made it up. So the experts will say, no, you don't use the phrase we came up with. You say, I carefully evaluated this case and here's the value. So, these are the types of things. And the other thing, every one of them said, stop using the word offer. So when you tell someone we're going to offer you something, or I'm going to offer to have you reimburse us 75% or whatever it is, anytime you use the word offer, to many people, what does the word offer mean? So you're actually telling the other person in advance, you should not accept this figure. You should not do this. And so every great negotiator I listened to didn't use that phrase. They all said the value of the case, the settlement value. Whether or not you're paying it, whether or not you're trying to collect money back, it doesn't matter. The point is, this is the settlement value of this case. And you talk in terms of the value rather than it being an offer. So those are kinds of words that we tend to use all the time that basically tell the people, give them all the wrong messages. Tells them, I'm just going to throw out a number and you're probably too dumb to realize it's a low figure. It's a number I've made up. I didn't take much effort to create this number because I just came up with it and I just took a look at it. And your issue is so unimportant to me, I almost didn't get to it. I had a chance to review it. So those are the types of things that you probably wouldn't pick up on your own, but when it's presented to you, you realize, oh yeah, okay, I've been saying the wrong thing.
What's that? Words matter. First impression principle is everything, right? When you're approaching somebody, whether they even realize it consciously or subconsciously, these terms, the words you use, do have an impact on results and how they respond.
Right. And the attorney says, of course, did you get our demand for $200,000? And the adjuster said, there's no way this thing's worth $200,000. Oh yeah, why not? And they start going back and forth and back and forth. And after about a half hour, the adjuster finally says, well, look, we can only pay 50 on this. We can pay 50. Think about that. Like he's apologizing to the attorney. Oh, Mr. Attorney, please accept this pittance. Please forgive us. Why did he say, here's why? Because one of our maxims is you got to stay in your conversation. After talking about $200,000 for a half hour, $50,000 didn't seem like a lot of money anymore. So that's why he spewed out this, we can pay 50. What he should have done was stay in his conversation. And when he called up the attorney, let's settle your case. And the attorney says, did you get our demand for 200,000? What he should have said is, yeah, I got your demand, but I'm more concerned about the value of the case. And the value is 50,000. So let me explain why. See, he should have spent a half hour talking about why he's right. He shouldn't spend a half hour talking to the attorney about why he's wrong. And several people get trapped into this too. So sometimes they'll be talking to an attorney and they'll be trying to convince the attorney or whoever it is that they're wrong and spend almost no time trying to convince them that they're right. And one of our maxims in negotiation is you don't have to prove anyone wrong. You only have to prove yourself right. And so that's what the truly great negotiators do. They focus on their issue rather than trying to prove another person wrong. Again, it's called staying in your conversation. That's part of why they excel in that, because they do focus on that and they do pay attention. And in the case of if you're going to spend a half hour trying to convince an attorney they're wrong, good luck with that.
Any other big words that you'd say, hey, we should avoid using?
Yeah, the words feel and think get used a lot. I really feel this is fair. I really think this is fair. And you're basically telling the person that you're not very confident. So if I were to ask a golfer, how many holes are there in regulation golf? They'll say 18. And then I'll say, well, how come you didn't say I feel there's 18? And they'll say, because I know it's 18. So you don't say feel or think when you know something. You just say it. This is a fair figure. Or this is a fair solution to our issue here. If I ask bowlers, what's the highest score in bowling? They'll just say 300. I'll say, well, how come you didn't say I think it's 300? And the answer is the same, because I know it's 300. Exactly. That's why you don't use the word feel and think when you're negotiating with people. This is fair. This is the right number. Okay. Not I feel it's fair. Not I think it's fair. It is fair. You want an attorney, we're going to pay you $200,000. All right, let me throw in another $10,000 to avoid litigation, whatever. The words throw in. When you tell someone we're going to throw in, you're painting a very clear mental picture. Here's a big giant pile of money, and here comes another shovelful. Well, if you're going to throw in 10,000, throw in 30,000.
Throwing it in,
Keep throwing it in. Yeah, we just throw money around here. Do you know that? We just walk down the hallways, it just comes right off the walls there. Throw it in. As a matter of fact, every expert I talked to said, no, you should never use that phrase. You should say, here's what you should say. I'll tell you what, $200,000 is a very fair figure. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to alter my evaluation to 200,010. Okay, 210,000. I'm going to alter my evaluation. They all said the same thing. You never say the words throw in. Another bad word is bump up. Here, let me bump it up. Let me bump it up 5,000. Let me bump it up. I mean, if that's all it takes to bump something up. They all said, use the phrase alter my evaluation, because we're going to pay what we've evaluated it. So if I'm talking to someone and I'm going to say, I'm going to evaluate this case at 50,000. All right, I can change my evaluation to 55. What I'm not going to do is say I'm going to throw in $5,000 because I don't want to give the impression.
Concrete confidence, right?
Not only that.
Clear that it's based on something, not just some, whimsical, number falling out of the sky.
And they also always recommended to say this phrase afterward. I'll alter my evaluation of whatever it is. I'll alter my evaluation of 100,000 because I can justify it and I can explain it. Say that to the other person, even to an attorney, because I can justify it and I can explain it. What that tells the other person is if you want more money than this, it's got to be justified. Somebody's going to have to explain this. It's going to have to make sense to somebody. And so by just using that phrase, even with a separate person, if they're negotiating a settlement and they finally concede, I'll tell you what, instead of $100,000, we will accept 90 because I can justify it and I can explain it, tells the other person this isn't a whim. That this is a serious matter, that somebody's going to have to make sense of this. And it puts the burden on the other person. Okay, well, then if you want more than what we're in our situation, well, then explain it and justify it.
And then when I talk to somebody and they say, I can justify and explain it, I can build a repertoire with them and be like, hey, I know Carl Van too. Perfect.
Very good. That's what I tell people. Just transfer them to me. I'll handle it.
One thing that I do in my training that's relatively related is we talk a lot about communications. And one important thing to me is the idea of catching more flies with honey. And one thing I've noted and noticed quite often is the claims industry, the legal industry. It's full of mental health issues and it's full of, depression and anxiety and issues. And why is that? And I truly think it's because of how I don't think that stems from just the controversy and just arguing and so forth. It stems from everyone just butting heads and everything having to be so transactional. And I push a lot of my people to be like, hey, one, you're going to catch more flies with honey by building relationships, by approaching every negotiation as if, hey, they're going to pay me 100% because they should. And we're going to be best friends. And I've learned over the years that, frankly, from the subro side, liability adjusters, sorry, they have quotas too. They have to resolve claims. And my goal is always to be the quota buster. If somebody has to get a few off their plate, I want them to pay me the extra 10%. And they might do that because I remember their kids play volleyball and they're going down to a tournament and building those connections, talking about the weather. One thing that you do train on, you talk quite a bit about, is the fastest ways to gain trust. What recommendations do you have just in general on, building those relationships and having good positive communications to result in better things?
Yes, that's maxim number 4, negotiations. People trust someone who's trying to help them, and they don't trust someone who's trying to hurt them. So how you say things can be important. So if I'm a subro person and I need my insured to sign a form so we can validate the claim so we can go get his deductible back. And if I say, I need you to fill out this form, and he says, no, I'm not doing it. Okay. And I say, well, if you don't fill it out, then we can't get your deductible back. Okay. That's a threat. The fastest way to lose someone's trust is to threaten them, even over lying to them. See, because even when you lie to someone, they may not know you're lying, or they may think you're just wrong and you're mistaken. But see, nobody misunderstands a threat. Nobody misunderstands being pushed around. Or you could say, you know what? I understand you don't want to fill out the form. If you can fill out the form, I can get going working hard and getting your deductible back. So one's a threat and one's an offer to help. And if it makes your job easier, people trust you, well, then just focus on the positive. Now, every once in a while, you might actually have to say, then I won't be able to do anything about it. But, the idea is first trying to show people you're trying to help them, I guess. Even if it's, let me help explain why it would be beneficial for you to finish paying off this promissory note. Use the word help and avoid, the threats and pushing people around. People don't like getting pushed around.
I want to get 100% back with a smile on their face, right? We want to lead the horse to water. It's like one of those things where I'll give examples. A lot of lawyers, I'll hear lawyers talking. The first thing they do is they call the adversary, the other adjuster, say, hey, we're going to file suit if we don't get this settled now or we don't get it resolved. On the other end, I'm calling up and I'm training my people. Hey, call them up and be like, hey, I remember it's a small industry. I remember Barbara, I have a note there. Barbara, kid plays club baseball. I'm asking, how'd the baseball team do this year? Barbara is amazed. Such an easy thing. But then we lead from that into, hey, let's talk about this, right? This is a good chance to try to get this resolved and it benefits everybody. However we can handle those things, I think it's really underutilized, but it's a skill set that I really feel that, I'm assuming you're also teaching people about, is how to properly communicate in positive ways to necessarily impact and have claims resolved in the right way.
And that's exactly right. And just because, for one thing, it makes our job easier. It's a lot less stressful trying to get people to give in.
So another thing you give tips on in negotiating, I know, is negotiating with attorneys. How adjusters can talk to these impossible people. Listen, I'm a lawyer. A lot of lawyers that work with me, and we're not the best people to talk to. Give me some tips and tricks. How should people negotiate with me? Short of course, if it's me, just pay me all the money that I'm asking for. But what tips do you have in communicating with lawyers?
One tip we give is to recognize what you already know, what you don't know. And many claims people will alter their evaluation figure. They'll increase their settlement figure at exactly the wrong time. They'll increase their settlement figure when the other person makes a good point. Every expert I talked to said you never do that. You never change your position when the other person makes a good point. Because if you change your position when the other person makes a good point, what are you training them to do? You're training them to keep making good points. You actually do it at a different time. Okay. And so let's say I'm talking to an attorney and I'm saying, okay, well, we're going to be able to pay you $100,000. And he says, well, but your client's going to make a terrible witness on his own behalf. If I right now say, okay, well, how about 110? Then he wins. What I would want to say is, you're absolutely right. Our insured is going to make a terrible witness on his behalf. As a matter of fact, I listened to him. He's going to be terrible. That's why we're talking about 100,000 and not 75. So tell me why 100,000 isn't right. Well, it's going to be a very liberal venue. Yeah, I know that. I realize that. That's why we're talking 100 and not 75. So again, what's wrong with 100? And so with attorneys, what you don't want to do is every time they bring something up, you throw more money at them because then they'll never stop.
With me, keep throwing money at. If they're with MW, I'll throw all the money. But if anyone else, don't do it.
My daughter's a lawyer too, so
Or your daughter.
Yeah, or my daughter. I'll pay everything my daughter wants. Yeah, so with attorneys, is you want to stay away from keep rewarding them every time they bring up something. The other one is the great negotiators I listened to said, treat the word offer like a tennis ball. You have a tennis ball, you throw it against the wall. What happens? It comes back. Here's what happens. You talk to an attorney and say, okay, well, let's see if we can't settle this case. Well, our demand's $200,000. Yeah, I know, but I want to talk about the value. The value is $50,000. Well, our demand's $200,000. I know, but you keep talking about demands. I'm trying to talk about the value. Well, we'll lower our demand to $190,000. You keep saying demand. I'm trying to talk about the value. What they'll say is every single time the attorney says demand, you say value. Every time. It lets the other person know, I'm not going to be fooled by some number you made up because you put no effort into this whatsoever. When I worked 2 hours on this, you made no effort. I'm not going to spend a half hour trying to talk to you about why you're wrong. I'm going to spend a half hour about why I'm right. And so they said, treat it like a tennis ball. Every single time the attorney says demand. And then, by the way, this works with Subro. So if you have an attorney, you're negotiating with an attorney about how little to pay back, same thing. They're going to say, well, our offer is to pay 50. You keep trying to talk about offers. I'm trying to talk about the fair value of the case. And you say it every time. So that's another tip with attorneys is don't let them take you down arguing about something they just made up.
And another tip for the audience is don't assume attorneys are good negotiators. I guarantee you most attorneys are probably significantly lesser negotiators than the average claims adjuster out there. They're less experienced. And I mean, it's also part of negotiations is not being too full of yourself and not thinking you always know the answer. It's being able to relatively build a relationship, be humble. So don't be, discouraged or don't just assume. And you see it pretty often where, adjusters, and we have several specialists that work with our firm, they get really nervous when they're talking to a lawyer negotiating. And I always have to tell them, listen, just because they went to law school doesn't mean, of course, there's powerful litigators that do get that background litigating cases. But just because you have a JD doesn't mean that you inherently are going to have some additional leverage in a negotiation.
Well, also don't, and that feeds right in my next point, I guess, is don't get pushed around. Don't get pushed around. And so I was monitoring a phone call and this adjuster says to this attorney, he says, well, there's no way your client got this injured in this accident. And the attorney says, oh yeah, what medical school did you go to? What he should have said is, when the attorney says, well, yeah, what medical school did you go to? What he should have said is, you don't have to have a medical degree to have an opinion. And my opinion is no one would have gotten this injured in that accident. And when the attorney says, well, that's just your opinion. Yes, that is my opinion. And I've been doing this a while and I'm allowed to have an opinion. So what we teach claims people is you're allowed to have an opinion. You're an expert in your field. You're allowed to. Don't let an attorney push you around by saying, well, somehow someone else is allowed to have an opinion and you don't. So not getting pushed around is a big thing. Also, pretty close to the same thing, an adjuster questioning this attorney's position on something. Well, there's just no way that this could have happened. Are you saying my client's lying? Is that what you're saying? Are you saying my client's lying? No, I'm saying I don't believe that your client needed rhinoplasty because of his ankle injury. That's what I'm saying. And so just to basically stay calm, don't fight back, and just stay with your case. But know that you're allowed to have an opinion. You don't have to feel bad that you can believe something or not believe it.
In my training, I also touch on the anchoring and adjustment heuristic. And it's a psychological heuristic that basically says that plaintiff's attorneys, yeah, you should ask for everything. But also those liability adjusters need to understand that they can't let that impact them, right? That is the play. One of the other things I did want to touch on is something impactful for communications that I'm sure you talk a bit about is I talk about the 70-30 rule. And when we're communicating, we want to strive to listen 70% of the time and speak 30% of the time. And now this is, if you can't tell, Carl, probably the hardest thing for me to have implemented. But sometimes you just need to shut your mouth and listen because that's where all the leverage is gained.
Yeah. I'm going to keep referring to our maxims. Our maximum number one, people will consider your point of view to the exact degree you show them you understand their point of view. And you can't show people you understand their point of view if you're not listening to them. So I'll give you a perfect example. Workers' comp adjuster calls up this person, this injured worker, and says, we're going to pay 50,000. Person says, no way, I want 100,000. Well, why would you want 100,000? Because the guy in the warehouse got 100,000 and he only had a stub toe. Guess what the adjuster started doing? Well, what kind of injury did he have? What was his medical bills? What was his disability rating? And now the two of them are talking about a claim neither one of them know anything about. There's no value in that. What he could have done, if he was listening, is he could have said, you know what? If the guy in the warehouse got 100,000 and you want 100,000 because your injury is worse than his, I can understand that. That makes sense. Would you agree that it probably makes more sense for us to talk about your injuries and how this affected you and your lost wages and not get distracted by some other claim? Would you agree with that? Yeah. Okay. Then let me explain to you why we're at $50,000. So people will consider what you have to say to the exact degree you show me understand their position, their point of view. So every great negotiator I talked to said, before you ever try to change anyone's mind about anything, show them you understand their position first. And you can't do that unless you're listening.
Never know about that other guy in the warehouse unless you listen to them tell you that. If you're thinking about your next point, how are you ever going to know?
And again, now here we are again trying to prove someone wrong instead of trying to prove ourselves. So it's a wasted conversation. So yes, I agree. Listening is a big part, and also not bothering correcting people if they're wrong. Sometimes it's just a matter of someone says, well, back on Wednesday, I said this. And you go, well, no, you said that on Tuesday. Who cares? Who cares if they said it on Wednesday or Tuesday? This isn't a debate you're trying to win. This is, you're trying to settle a case. So that's the other thing, listen for the points that really need to be rebutted. And you'll be amazed. Sometimes you don't even need to make a comment about something. Even when somebody says something wrong, you don't really even need to make a comment about it. So listening is a big factor because that's the key to showing people you understand where they're coming from, is to listen to them long enough to understand it.
Agreed. Now, I want to run on to time management and customer service tips. But before that, was there anything else negotiation-wise that the audience needs to know?
No, without turning into a marketing issue, because I don't want to do that. But probably the most important thing we teach in that class is the 5-step negotiation process. And most claims people, whether it's subro or liability, they think they know what they're doing as far as the process goes. So most people have never actually been trained on the 5-step process for negotiations. So that's one of the things that people walk away with is they walk away with, hey, I can do this now. And they walk away with a way to fall back into a conversation without having to wing. That's probably the most powerful thing they walk away with is a process that they can apply to every situation.
Now, is that secret sauce? You're able to tell us those 5 steps?
It would take so long to explain it. I don't know if it'd be valuable. But, the first step is to ask people why they want what they want, of course. Acknowledge their point. Then you have to build them a bridge, which means to give them a reason to give up what they believe is right and bring them over to your side. Okay. Something called get their agreement, meaning get their agreement to listen to your facts and then present the facts. So the steps won't help if you don't understand what they mean, but those are the steps. But the bridge is very important. And that's where a lot of people leave that out. They'll argue with the other person, but they won't give any reason. Give me any reason that I should give up what I believe and come join you. And oftentimes we don't do that.
And that's the idea of the bridge. It's the communication bridge. It's the bridge you can walk, you can walk the other side back to your perspective. Is that kind of what you're saying, or? Yes.
So, example, monitoring a phone call, and this lady said she's negotiating a bodily injury, and she says, "Well, I want, we basically said we're going to pay her 60,000. She says, I want 100,000. Why do you want 100,000? Because my Aunt Edna has been worried sick about me." And the adjuster said, "Well, look, 60,000 is what we can pay," and never gave the person any reason why they should give this up. So the right answer, if you're going to use a bridge, would be, you know what, if you're looking for extra money because Aunt Edna was affected like you, I understand that. That makes perfect sense. Here comes the bridge. If there was a way that we could pay you for Aunt Edna's reaction to your injury, boy, I'd love to do it. It's just not compensable. It's not compensable in the United States. It's not compensable under any insurance policy for definition of bodily injury. Love to do it if we could, but we can't. What I can do is pay you what you're entitled to, and I'd like to explain that to you. So in that particular case, the bridge would be give the person a reason. Why should I give up wanting money because this affected Aunt? In that conversation I listened to, 22 minutes that conversation went, the adjuster never actually said, we're not paying Aunt Edna. Never actually said those words. So that's what the bridge is. The bridge is, what is the reason they should give this up? Sometimes they're under the wrong impression about what the loss is. So if it's at Subro, someone's under the wrong impression that, well, you guys are at fault. Why would you think we're at fault? Because your insured apologized to me at the accident scene.
Right.
Okay. So the wrong thing is to start arguing with the person. The right thing is, you know what? If you believe that we're at fault because our insured apologized to you, I can understand that makes sense. Policy makes it very clear that we make all liability decisions. The liability decision is up to us, not the insured. So I can understand why you'd believe we're at fault because he apologized. But we look at the rules of the road, and I want to explain those rules of the road to you now. So the bridge would be explaining to the person, why should I give up believing you're at fault when your insured apologized to me? Because we're the ones who make liability decisions. So that's the reason. The reason is what our insured said doesn't play into this. So that's the bridge. And that's probably the hardest of the 5 steps for people to get a hang of, because they're so used to arguing, trying to prove someone wrong. They're not listening. Like you said, they're not listening long enough to really understand the other person's position.
I love that. It's also getting to the issue at hand, right? A lot of times when you don't listen, you're just trying to tell them all your good facts, and they're telling me their good facts. And then but if you have this bridge, then obviously you're also getting to what is at issue for that, right? Rather than just what's at issue in your mind. I like that a lot.
Yep. So I can give you the words of the 5 steps, but yeah, it takes a good couple hours in class to actually lay it out and have people practice it. And that's the other thing. Every one of our classes, we spend a lot of time practicing. We don't just give information. Okay. You understand that? Now let's practice.
Well, the audience, I'm hoping the audience members will reach out and be like, I need to go to the International Insurance Institute with Carl Venn to learn more of that. Now, Carl, time management tips. So I wanted to touch on a few of the other important things that you touch on. Now, how about time management? I feel like that's a huge thing in the industry, is how to appropriately manage our time. Make sure we're efficient, we're effective, we're optimized. We all have the same hours in the day. How do we maximize that time? Walk me through some tips that our audience can take away on management of their time.
Well, we do 2 things. First one is, let's figure out why we're doing this extra work and eliminate it. And then with the work we have left over, how do we organize it? So here's one. I'll start with 1, the voicemail multiplier has all the time. Adjusters, doesn't matter who, again, they like to let calls go into voicemail. And so I was in an office and this one person said to me, well, Carl, would you get my manager off my back for me? What's wrong with your manager? She's always nagging me to answer the phone. Well, maybe you should answer the phone, He says, I know, but sometimes if I'm working on something and it's complicated, I don't like being interrupted. I'd rather let the call go into voicemail and deal with it later. Okay, how many phone calls do you think you get in a week? And he says 200. I said, okay, here's your 2 choices. The phone rings, you can let it go into voicemail or you can answer it. Let's say you answered every single phone call that comes in this entire week. Every call. Now, you can't do that because sometimes you're not there. Sometimes you're on the phone, but let's say you could. If you answered every single phone call that comes in, how many total phone calls you got? 200, because you answered them all. But let's say instead of that, you let every single call go into voicemail. What do you have to do with those 200 phone calls now? We have to return them. Not 100%. Most time management say about 90%. So you're going to have to make 180 outgoing phone calls. Let me ask you the next question. Do you get 180 of those people? Nope. Time management experts say you get about half. So you talk to 90, leave a message for 90. What do those 90 people do when they get your message? They call back. Not 100%, 90%. So now you get 81 phone calls, and of course it rolls into voicemail. What do you have to do with those 81 phone calls? Call them back. 100%, 90%. So now you make 72 outgoing phone calls. Do you get all 72 of those people? Now you get about half. So you talk to 36, leave a message 36. What do those 36 people do? They call you back. Not 100%, 90%. So now you get 33 phone calls, and of course it rolls into voicemail. Again, what do you got to do with those 33 phone calls? You got to call them back, right? Now you got to make 30 outgoing phone calls. Do you get all 30 of those people? No, you get about half. So I know it's tedious, but it's called the voicemail multiplier. And what the voicemail multiplier says is by the time you're done, by the time that's finally finished, that's going to add up to 600, 800, somewhere in there. So what the voicemail multiplier says is that for every call you could have answered, for every call like that, you've just generated, on the average, 3 to 4 more phone calls later. You have created work. And this work that you just created doesn't even exist until you chose not to answer that call in order to be efficient. So what we teach people, and we've got to eliminate some work. Let's find some things. First of all, we can eliminate work, and that's one of them. So what we have to do is we have to set priorities. Here's a very big priority. Anything that will take me less time to do now than if I do it later is a priority now, even if it's not as important. Why? Because if everything I do now takes me less time than if I do it later, what will I have later? More time. Okay. So let's say I'm working on something, okay? And the phone rings. I can't tell which one's more important, but I know one thing about that phone call. If I don't pick it up, it's more work later. That makes it a priority. So I do pick up the phone. Yes, can I help you? Yeah, what's your mailing address? Fine, here's our mailing address. Hang up. Go back to what you're working on. Let's say it's more severe. Yes, can I help you? Yeah, I want to know why the appraiser didn't put a new fender on my car. Tell you what, let me call the appraiser and call you back by 3:00. Hang up. Finish what you're working. Then go deal with this thing. Okay? That's what a lot of people do is they won't answer the phone because they don't like to be interrupted because they interrupt themselves. But right now, if it's something that can be held off, hold it off, finish what you're working on, and then go deal with that thing. So that's kind of the setting priorities there, is look for the opportunities to do things now versus later because it'll save you time now. And
so the marginal increase in productivity for somebody in the industry where we are all so busy, adjusters, they're being compared, and if 10% additional productivity is going to over years make that person a really hot commodity. I mean,
oh yeah, absolutely. And here's the funny thing. When you talk about customer service, when I do a survey, we work for a lot of insurance companies all over the United States, Canada, all over. Almost always the top 2 complaints of any claims or sub-organization, the top 2 complaints are almost always, number 1, they're never available. I'm always getting some damn voicemail. And number 2, they don't return the phone calls. So it's almost always not number 1 and 2. So let's say you and I are in an office. And let's say I come up to you and I say, hey, did you see what happened on The Bachelor last night? See what they did with that rose? And right now your phone rings. You have a decision to make. Do I sit here and listen to Carl talk about The Bachelor? Or do I pick up this phone? Now, normally you'd let that call go right into voicemail. But now you know the voicemail multiplier. Now that you know every call you don't pick up is generating more work, now you say, I'll tell you what, Carl, let's do this a break. I went down. What happened to customer service? Went up. Right. So there's a big myth that customer service takes more work. There's a big myth. When in fact, almost all of the things that you do to improve customer service, if you have a good relationship with the customer, whoever it is, the claimant, the insured, doesn't much matter. Actually, it makes the job easier. So it actually saves time rather than taking more of an effort.
I love
so
that.
Those are the kind of priorities we look for in class is, okay, well, let's take a look at everything that's going and let's take a look at those priorities and which ones right now would save us time later. And that's the point. You want to save yourself some time, not just reorganize it. And so when I get at the very beginning of class, someone will always ask me, Carl, how could I possibly return 50 phone calls in a day? As soon as they say that, my answer is, well, now I know your issue. You see, you can't possibly return 50 phone calls in a day. That's not even possible. So you're trying to solve an impossible problem. So you asked me the wrong question. Guess what you should have asked me? What am I doing that's making me get 50 phone calls? So it's a matter of looking to reduce the amount of work. That's the first half. And then the second half is now let's organize it and set priorities so we get the right things done.
And that's something we see in the legal industry. And it's hugely impactful. I train a lot of my lawyers. 9 out of 10 clients I've brought on to our firm, brought in a lot of clients over the years. It hasn't been because they got bad results at trial and they're looking for a new lawyer because of that. We have a huge interplay. We use technology. We have now an AI basis. But also the only reason I'm ever going to go kick somebody's door in and yell is going to be you didn't respond to a client. So I tell all my attorneys, all my people, if a client emails you, if they call you, you respond immediately. Even if that response is, hey, I'm looking at this. I'll be in touch with you later today, or I'll be in touch with you soon. One, it keeps it moving. It makes the client know you're responding. And it also is a lot quicker than getting another email 20 minutes later, an hour later, 2 days later saying, hey, I need a response. And that is endemic in the industry. And, I feel like post-COVID, people always say it, just customer service has fallen off a cliff. I don't know why. Some people say, oh, it's the work from home. I don't necessarily buy that. Maybe. Other people say it's just based on, people stopped caring so much. But what other tips, as we talk customer service, insurance carriers are obviously, this is not a popular time to be an insurance company. They're not getting a great rap. You guys are almost in the ballpark with lawyers now of dislike. What other tips are there? Like what can adjusters people do better on a customer service basis?
For several people, I recommend something I learned a long time. refer to them when you're talking to them. Believe it or not, even though oftentimes it's adversaries, is refer to them as customers. Okay. I know that it's going to sound strange, but let me give you an example. A sub-adjuster calls up this person. The sub-adjuster got the claim too early. It wasn't settled yet. And then the sub person actually had to try to get a statement out of the claimant. So he calls up this claimant and says, hey, I need to take your statement. The guy says, no way. Why? Because you'll just use it against me. And the sub person said, well, why would I do that? Another person I heard pretty close to being the same thing calls up this claimant, says, hey, I need to take your statement. The guy says, no way. You guys are biased because it's your policyholder. And he says, you know what? If you don't want to give me a statement because you're concerned we're biased because it's our policyholder, I understand that. You're absolutely right. It is our policyholder. But you're our customer too. By the virtue of our insured having an accident with you, that makes you our customer too. And you're entitled to every bit of consideration and respect as our policyholder. The purpose of the statement isn't to use it against you, it's to find out what happened. And I would like to find out what happened. Now, we do have our insured statement, but we don't have yours. And you're entitled to have your say here. You're entitled to have us consider your position. And the statement is the way to do that. So it was just a different way of saying kind of the same thing. And by the fact that he said, you're our customer too, you're entitled to consideration, basically told the other person, there's always two sides to every story. And we're here to find the truth. We're not here to stack the deck against you. And so I've recommended to, not when you're in an adversarial role, but maybe when you're just talking to the person, you are a customer and you're entitled to good customer service. So let me explain to you why it would be your benefit to reimburse 100%. however you want to phrase it, but to be more on the customer service side as opposed to the attacking side.
Yeah. Enter every conversation. It's the idea of relational versus transactional conversations, right? I mean, you want to lead relational until the other side pulls out the sword. I'm pulling out the sword, right? But in the end, otherwise, we want to be friends with our adversaries, right? I don't necessarily, I know a lot of negotiation professors don't like to use the term adversaries, right? Or, or your partners. I don't mind it. I think you can still be a partner with an adversary. But in the end, I think that's really important. Now, Carl, one thing I do always like to ask is, especially for people like you who have spent, a storied career in the insurance space, what tips do you have for those in the audience who are younger, who are just entering the insurance field? Do you, short of course, taking Carl Van's course, but what tips do you have for them as they enter the field that can help them kind of progress in the industry?
Take advantage of free training. Take advantage of these podcasts. We have our own YouTube channel called Insurance Institute TP. And on that, every few weeks we post a 5 or 10 minute video on, right now we're doing negotiations. Completely free, 100%. You don't have to pay for it. And you can get some tips from professionals. So maybe the articles that come out, the periodicals, podcasts, YouTube videos, take advantage of the free training. Sometimes a company will come in and do free training. It's going to be an hour, but you could easily pick up something that's going to be valuable for the rest of your entire career in an hour. So it's worthwhile. So not to see information or training as an obstruction to your job, but part of your job. Your job is to learn. Your job is to get better. And see that gaining information as a chance for you to do your job better as opposed to getting in your way of doing your job. And that, that's probably the thing I see the most with new people coming on. They don't feel like they have the time. And it's that time investing in themselves that's going to pay the real dividends.
100%. I love that. Well, Carl, anything else that you want to add? Any takeaways that we missed?
I'm waiting for the balloons, man.
All right. That is on my list. So when it comes to communication and building those relationships, I will mention one of the things that I will do quite often is I'll hear something and I'll be like, hey, I have a client that really likes, so we have the Wisconsin State Fair, and Wisconsin State Fair, big state fair. They have like you can get deep fried butter, deep fried Oreos, but they also have these cream puffs, which are these, it's like some breaded pastry with all the cream. A client loved them, and I sent them every year. I send them a few of those. Another client was joking about, what was it? That we were at a fancy conference and they really like Busch Light beer. And they couldn't get Busch Light beer. So the next time, conference, I brought them a case of Busch Light. These small things. So now I know, Carl. And that's, next time I see you, I will bring some balloons with me.
I'm here today because Latitude Subrogation is sponsoring this. So I got to throw in a plug for them.
Of course, Latitude and John, great people over there. Paul, the whole team. amazing people.
No, they're terrific folks.
Like, Carl, I appreciate you. Where can people find you? We give contact information, website,
Yes.
just so they can locate you.
.com is our website, and our catalogs are all there. And like I said, our YouTube is Insurance Institute TV. And all the videos there, I think we're up to 20 videos right now, all free for claims people. So they can find me through the Institute. And we do in-person training, we do webinars, and we do recorded content. Some companies actually call us up and say, we just want a recording that we can send out to people. And we'll do that too.
Excellent. Well, everyone knows where to find you. Carl, again, thank you so much. This is a fantastic 50th podcast.
50th, that's right.
I know.
I'll be back for the 100th. I want to come back for the 100th.
Done. It is on the list. Peyton, make sure of it. But yeah, Carl, I appreciate you. Audience, thank you so much. Again, this is Ashton Kirsch signing off with the Subrogation Support Network podcast. Until next time.